Selamat datang di Gedung Selamat Riyadi, Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta dengan bangga menjadi tuan rumah Lomba Debat Indonesia tahun 2025. Ajang yang mempertemukan para pemikir muda terbaik dari SMA seluruh Indonesia. Di sini, gagasan diuji, keberanian diuji, dan logika dipertajam. Kompetisi ini bukan hanya tentang menang, tetapi tentang bagaimana setiap peserta menyuarakan masa depan. Dari Sabang hingga Merauke, para delegasi hadir membawa semangat, budaya, dan harapan. Bersatu dalam satu panggung argumentasi terbesar untuk SMA di Indonesia. Selamat datang di Lomba Debat Indonesia 2025. Siapkan argumen terbaikmu, tunjukkan potensimu, dan jadilah generasi pemikir masa depan.
Cika, dia telah lulus SMA, tapi bingung mau kuliah di mana?
Jangan bingung, mari bergabung bersama kami di Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta.
UAJY memiliki 7 fakultas dan 14 program studi yang dapat jadi pilihan loh.
Jangan khawatir, UAJY menyediakan miliaran beasiswa yang bisa kamu dapatkan. Tentunya, terdapat program seleksi yang masih dibuka. Informasi lebih lanjut dapat mengunjungi situs pmb.uajy.ac.id. So, tunggu apa lagi?
Bakal nyesel loh kalau nggak daftar sekarang.
Welcome to Yogyakarta, the city of students. The city where a significant number of public and private schools and universities are located. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta, a private university established on September 27, 1965 by Yayasan Selamat Riyadi Yogyakarta.
Dalam bahasa Sanskerta, Atma berarti jiwa dan Jaya berarti unggul, sehingga Atmajaya berarti jiwa yang unggul. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta juga memiliki semboyan dalam bahasa Latin Serviens in Lumine Veritatis, yang artinya melayani dalam cahaya kebenaran.
The four core values upheld by UAJY are excellence, inclusivity, humanism, and integrity. Excellence implies equality or being better than others. Inclusivity means encompassing all social groups. Humanism, the definition, means to serve the common interest of fellow humans. Integrity means adherence to the moral and ethical principles, honesty, reliability, consistency in words and acts, and a sense of responsibility. UAJY supports diverse values, cultures, religions, races, ethnicities, and languages as a university with students from all across Indonesia. UAJY's diversity is an asset for further collaboration and synergy in preparing for a better future.
Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta memiliki 4 kampus yang terbagi menjadi Kampus 1, Gedung Santo Alfonsus. Kampus 2, Gedung Santo Thomas Aquinas. Kampus 3, Gedung Santo Bonaventura. Dan Kampus 4, Gedung Bunda Teresa. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta memiliki fakultas dengan berbagai program studi sarjana, program studi magister, dan international undergraduate program.
Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta is a second home for every individual to develop and share information, and a university with a high-quality education to attain unlimited aspirations and accomplishments. To achieve the goals, UAJY provides classrooms with hybrid learning system, laboratories in each faculty as a room to explore, co-working space as a discussion room, medical personnel who are always available in the university clinic room, and a library that provide books, e-books, and digital libraries to open a wide window onto the world in various ways.
UAJY selalu konsisten memberikan pelayanan yang didasari rasa solidaritas kepada sesama. Selama saya bekerja di UAJY, saya merasakan kekeluargaan yang sangat kuat menjadi dasar bagi seluruh sivitas akademika.
UAJY endeavors to develop graduates who are ethical, creative, innovative.
Case building time is over, but before I move on to reminders, I want to ask both teams speaking order first. For proposition, and for op as well. Okay, everyone. First off, congratulations on making it to the Octo finals of LDI Cabang Bahasa Inggris 2025. My name is Joka. I'm from Sulawesi Utara. I'll be chairing this round. I'm accompanied by two wonderful judges who I would also ask to introduce themselves.
Hello everyone, Manda here from Lampung. All the best for the round.
Hello everyone, my name is Yuli from Kalimantan Barat. Best of luck.
Before I call upon the first speaker of prop, a few reminders. First, please do be mindful of the equity briefings that we have multiply reminded you guys of. Second, we are in a live stream room. Therefore, please also try to avoid name dropping certain figures, institutions, as much as you can. Please avoid that since this is live stream. So we minimize the risk of not having to take down the live stream. With that being said, to start the debate, calling upon the first speaker of side proposition here.
Alright, am I audible? There might be some sensitive things in my speech, so I will try to be as attentive as I could. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Judges, we believe that people who do crime are still humans. There may be those with pure malicious intents, but there are also an abundance of people that are under banality, which is not purely evil, but merely victims of the criminal justice system itself. In this debate, we're going to prove to you why the likelihood of declining criminal rates is still going to exist, which then fulfill the urgency of the judicial system itself, and how there are going to be more people on the ground to be integrated back to society and live a better life life, and then probably we're going to win on the scale of how there are going to be more people to be happy. But then several models to actually set up this debate, right? First, I think this is going to be in the view or in the interest of the state and like the judicial system, the judicial court itself, to achieve better and more just system. And obviously they want reliance, right? They want public view that they're actually reliable, that actually push this entire like fair and objective justice system itself, better framework to operate so that people will probably trust them more and they're not like, you know, depicted as corrupted. But second, I think this can also be in the eyes of people or like normal people to actually gain more safety and less crime to begin with, less prejudice, and also less like, you know, the feelings of actually being threatened every single day that they, you know, all of these things are still existing. But second, I think we're gonna like list of like what media is supposed to be. I think most medias are private owned. Some of them might be influenced by state, but inherently they're still owned by people, meaning they are most likely profit-oriented, and the characterization of media is that they would publish news not just to inform, but to gain revenue because they are lucrative by engagement. They want to make flashy headlines that attract more people, more discourse, more like viral things on the media, for example, that probably will actually worsen the digital footprint that actually kind of violate the entire privacy of these humans being, right? But third of all, how does require anonymizing the identity of criminals actually look like? I think this looks like, first, we're going to push the policy that criminals' name can only be published through like pseudonyms, or like their faces are going to be like blurred or masked, their races, their like identity, etc. would not really be like, you know, integrated into the news, etc. But second, I think the crimes are still going to be published, the chronological order of the crime, etc. when this happened, how this happened, will still be published. They will just leave out the entirety, like the personal identity of the criminal itself. Hence, awareness can still exist in outside the house. People can still have like the acknowledgement that these things are still happening. They probably still have the, you know, the rights to eventually know what's going on in their country, right? But fourth of all, the burden of proof here is that we're going to like find in the debate which mechanization is actually much better in terms of value, time, scale, and magnitude to actually fulfill a better life with more proper judicial system and probably like a bigger scale of people that we can cater to. Several arguments then. First, about why is this aligned with the judicial purpose, hence it's going to be justified, and second, about the entire like practical benefits. But first, argument then. Why is this justified? I think courts and trials are put to give proportionate retribution to perpetrators and victim closure. I think the very purpose of them is to eventually maximize the retribution system, and we buy that check and balance, right? But let's see the layers then. I think to anonymize criminals is to actually give them space for them to be reintegrated towards society. Why is this exclusive then? I think we noticed that there have been recurring reoffenders that do crimes because their names have been labeled and permanently in the digital footprints. Like in the end of the day, there have been many criminals that are being put in the flashy headlines of Twitter, etc. that people have already, for example, known, have seen. It's been on the top trending site, for example. In the end of the day, it will be permanent on the internet, right? But this will actually lead to more like manifestation of harms. Why? Because that means past criminals will not going to be seen as someone that actually deserve to be in society for their past actions. Because we noticed that a lot of media eventually is very contingent to the fact that there are many viewers, there are many people that engage on them. In the end of the day, people probably have their own prejudice of this. It can actually also be contingent to, for example, they label their like their religion, their race, for example. They probably can actually give more prejudice into that. It will be later explained on my DPM. But why is this like bad? I think their reputation has been completely reshaped as criminals in the media, right? Meaning the analysis is that once you respect their privacy, you give them the time to work on themselves by like rehabilitation, by community service, for example, and other proportionate like criminal justice systems of the pillars, for example. And the thing about like what is the incentive for these criminals to still want to be better is that at least they are optimistic that they are still given a second chance. At least that they know like you know, their friends are not going to alienate them in the end of the day because they know that they have a proper closure and their identity is not fully exposed to the media. They are optimistic that they can actually be a better person, right? But second of all, why is it still going to fulfill victim closure? We said that the catharsis or satisfaction of victims is in the isolation or retribution for the perpetrators itself, not the publishment. Okay, maybe some victims are happy that, for example, the criminals are like, you know, getting insulted very bad, but I think the very inherent of whether or not the degree of catharsis is better is when the retribution or the proportionality for the perpetrators are actually given according to their crimes, right? In the end of the day, what makes it like better in terms of value and moral obligation is the retribution and not the publishment, right? This also second actually push proportionality so that in the end of the day, laws can actually be integrated well and not just like by media, like influence and backlashes from people, subjectivity of viewers and engagement, for example. And the end of the day, I think that once the victims actually feel safe because the perpetrators are isolated or like incarcerated, for example, they are probably already have contentment, and that's enough in the end of the day in our side of the house. But second of all, why is this actually going to achieve a better world and bigger scale of happiness? We say that if this reintegration actually happens due to the virtue of anonymity, more people can actually be reintegrated in society and live a normal life just like how they used to be. There, like another bonus is that at the very least, when their identity is not published to the entire internet, because like if you're publishing your identity, probably a lot of people can find like your family, who you are actually related to, for example. But if you don't do this, at the very least, their family will not be haunted by the past narrative of their crime and not associated for like, oh, your brother's a criminal, whatever is going to actually happen in the very much of the discourse. But why is this good? I think it's very good because not every criminals are inherently evil. In like, you can see that in the utilitarianism metric, we know that many people on the ground may need to survive based on things that are not legal because they cannot afford it. I think if they want to bring any rich people ideal, it's going to be inherently symmetrical because they can afford like lucrative job as in like the entire judicial system, so it's not going to apply. But hence, this means that they can actually continue their life without worrying about backlashes that a lot of people probably alienate them, right? And I think this is also very exclusive to those who need to survive based on like a larger degree of crimes, because in the end of the day, it's going to make them at the very least evaluate themselves without having to be like put on this pressure of prejudice that they have entirely made a very, very bad mistake, and therefore they probably are not going to be deserving into the community itself. But I think let's go not preemptive, right? I think they'll probably talk about like the media disclosure, and in the end of the day, there'll be like more check and balance. But we say that trials and cases will still be held in a way that civilians may be involved. There are open cases, but the discourse can still happen, but the media is not permitted to publish their identity. So in the end of the day, there's still going to be a third person that probably give their own like ideas so that the entire trial would be more just. But second of all, I think this is also going to push the objectivity of trials and make it better, because again, the crimes are still published, people still know the chronological events of crimes, and people probably also know that like, okay, something is going to be missing here. In the end of the day, proportionality happens. And second, and third of all, deterrence will not really work, because in the end of the day, people would probably try to like do many things that are not going to be, they cannot be caught by law, but probably still do their crimes. In the end of the day, it's going to be symmetrical. Very, very proud to propose.
Thank you very much for that speech. Inviting first speaker of opposition, here.
There are limitations to sort of which crime are deserving of second chances and which crime are so inherently harmful and so inherently evil that they aren't deserving of second chances. We protect all people. But first, let's do the setup. The thing is, Gov would anonymize the identity of these individuals insofar as their names, their address, for example, their nationality, for example, etc., etc. Ops says we should stay in the status quo and publicize all of this information, right? The thing is, the BOP under two side is simple. Gov tries to prove to you that there is a problem in the status quo and no alternative to it, which they aren't able to prove insofar as there is no reasoning as to why there is no alternative to achieve better rehabilitation processes. But the way that we would try to attack this is by saying that there is no problem in the very first place insofar as the solution that they produce to you is a solution mismatch. But what's up case here other than that? The first, that even if the problem exists, there is already self-correction strength to solve it, and Gov just adds additional harm into it. But what's out of the discussion is the whole PM case about petty crimes be deserving of second chances. The thing is, public image destruction would limit petty criminals. Trying to do rehab is not a thing, insofar as most probably this hate from the civilians toward the criminal would be most apparent towards politicians, towards billionaires, for example, not towards petty crimers who do things because they are forced to do so, who I don't even know their names before I heard them on the news doing the crime. But why is this the case? The thing is, people are rational and people base their attention selectively based on the degree of harm that they accrue. What happens then? The thing is, attention towards petty crime wouldn't be as much. But even if it is much, we would argue that it would fade away in the future. Insofar as it doesn't harm me, why should I care, right? Perhaps he does it because he is forced to do so. I have limited attention. If it doesn't harm me, I'm not going to care for that as much, and the trend would fade away. But moreover, the thing is, like, even if petty crimes got very, very much attention, what would happen? It's good. It increases the buy-in from people to selectively stop this petty crime. People realize crime is done because people are starving to death. Let's put the government on the blame here and stop the starving to death problem, for example, right? The thing is, without the identification of individuals, this thing couldn't happen, insofar as if people don't know which region is this person doing criminal of theft is from, perhaps I don't know which government from which region should be taken accountable to, for example, right? We allow better check and balances to protect this petty crime. But moreover, where do attention be most likely be directed at? Most likely, attention would be directed into the billionaires, into the politicians who are doing massive, vast sum of corruption. Insofar as people have interest to cater towards those media, for example. I am harmed by corruption insofar as my quality of life decreases. I don't get as better of public infrastructure, for example, etc., right? I do care about it. But moreover, the fact that they have failed their political mandate, they have failed me, I do care about that, right? Insofar as if I pick politicians A in the past and I see that there is a problem of him doing corruption, for example, I would divert my attention so much towards it. Therefore, Gov lacks the analysis onto which attention would be directed at. But moreover, we allow for better model of deterrence, insofar as the thing is, one of the biggest aspect of deterrence is public image destruction. The thing is, corruptors who have millions sums of money, perhaps fine is not something that is really that bad for them, right? Or perhaps like imprisonment is not something that is really bad for them, insofar as it is worth it. 2.5 years of prison for like 60 billion rupiah, I would argue that it is worth it, insofar as if you get the minimum wage, you wouldn't able to get it anyway, right? But what happens under our side of the house? You stop the ability for these people to get more money in the future, for example. You create deterrence, you create scrutinization that happens towards these people, for example, etc., right? This is good, because the people who are scrutinized by people are people who are non-deserving of second chances, right? But this is why Op couldn't run the argument of, oh, this criminal would offend their crime because their name is bad already. No. We stop these criminals from recreating their crime, insofar as it is a mechanism of self-defense for the people. I will talk about this later. But moreover, why are they non-deserving of second chances? First, they have failed their political mandate in the past. We will argue to you that they don't deserve the trust of the people. But moreover, that they do it because of inherent evil. Therefore, Gov argument about them being forced to do it because of petty crime doesn't run. What's the POI?
Politicians and billionaires are able to control the media insofar as they are profit-oriented. How is your judicial process going to be objective in your side?
I do think that even if manipulation happens under our side of the house, we would argue that independent media exists insofar as they aren't able to be influenced by these billionaires and politicians. But moreover, we would argue to you that it is worsened under your side of the house exactly because of the lack of victims closure. What's the problem? The thing is, it's hard to say or guarantee that criminals would change their mind after CJS change, right? But what is easy to guarantee and what we run is that the way that people consume and react to this media, right? What's the harm that exclusively exists under GOV? The thing is, there will be loss of credibility of CJS. This is very apparent in troublesome politics, for example, right? Insofar as if the government suddenly stops telling me the name of criminals, I would argue that I would perceive it badly and the media would perceive it badly too. Insofar as I would be scared because knowing the name of the people doing crimes is a mechanism of self-defense for me, right? The thing is, identification of criminals is a method for self-defense for the people. They base their decision in the future based on this information. This gives victim closure insofar as if politicians A done corruption, perhaps in the future election, I wouldn't pick politicians A insofar as I want to protect my national fund, for example, right? To not be corrupted. This ability doesn't happen in government side of the house insofar as people don't know which politicians have done corruption, which politicians is clear. Therefore, what happens? Corruption happens again and again and again insofar as politicians can use the money that they got from corruption to lobby the government to do better campaign, for example, because they have more money, they get those money from corruption that happens massively, right? So we want on the victim's closure, but moreover, inherently there is a CJS effectivity that happens under our side of the house insofar as many court cases are problematic and there is no check and balances from it. This is very apparent in countries with very low CJS accountability, i.e. you import sugar and brings revenue to the state, you are convicted as doing crime. We don't want this, public participation, stop this. Proud to oppose.
Thank you so much for that speech. Inviting second speaker of proposition, here.
Check, is this audible? Audible, okay. Give me a moment. A few trigger warning. I would be a little bit talking about discrimination to minorities. I'm just very, very sorry if this tends to offend anyone. Considering the fact that this is recorded, don't take anything from this debate out of context. Everything that I say is for the sake of competitive debating. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels. While under opposition, the CJS will inherently feed into the privilege even when the proximity of harms and crime that they commit is immensely larger. We are the only one that can actually ensure the amount of objectivity still stands of court at the end of the day, making sure that externalities of exposure and etc. will not do the crime doers justice. This is exactly the flaw within opposition's case, right? They want to glorify so much within the discourses that came within the exposure that comes within these media, but we say that the exposure will only gain coercive narratives within the society in terms of pushing the idea that these crimes it can work both ways, not only within the victim closure, but also it can get away crime doers from the things that they're doing. This is a harm that we don't want to take at the end of the day, right? The reason why criminals do what they have done is not because they want to, but because of the sake of survivability, right? This is a vulnerable actress within this debate, because if the people, they want to talk about the people that are inherently evil, if they want to talk about the deterrence effect about these people, they're inherently just out of this debate, because inherently, with all of the consequences that they can face, they would still commit the crime anyways. I don't get how the deterrence effect under their side can actually even get within these people, because if they already are knowing the idea of they're going to be exposed and etc., and they still want to do it, I don't get how it's going to be a saver at the end of the day under their side of the house, right? This is a harm that is unexclusive. So the vulnerable actors the debate, within this debate, is that people who do it for the sake of survivability, because they're the ones that would get the most harms out of this, right? This is literally the metric that needs to be taken account. Why? Because the harms of manipulations coming from like corruptors and basically people who do have like capital to start with are inherently going to be the same under both sides of the house. What is the delta here then becomes? We actually give the chance for people who do crimes for the sake of survivability a chance to be reintegrated within society and not let them starve and alienated within society. I think this is an exclusive benefit that we can claim at the end of the day, right? Some independent rebuttals then, if they say that there's going to be a distinction between which crimes that needs a second chance and which one does not, we say that there's no problem with anonymity then. If the court is really that objective, if the court is really that good enough without like the discourses that comes without the media, but then anonymity wouldn't be your problem, right? But exactly, no, the amount of discourses that comes out from the externalities is affecting so much within the court. We say that this can actually lead to a lot of backlashes. This can work both ways, not only within the victim closure itself, but also to actually justify what the crimes doer has already been doing. This is exactly the same metrics, right? So how do we create rehabilitation at the end of the day better? We don't let them die within the alienation that's happening in the status quo. We actually let them integrate within society. We actually let them have a second chance into living their life at the end of the day. I think this is a benefit that at the end of the day is very, very much important, because at the end of the day, we don't let these people who are inherently vulnerable to die within like the status quo, right? In terms of petty crimes then, in terms of what is the exclusivity that these billionaires and politicians are going to be deterred anyway within their side of the house, right? They can always afford to silence the media at the end of the day. Even if they say that independent media still exists at the end of the day, these are people who have inherently capital at the end of the day and human resources that can bribe at the end of the day. This is something that is inherently still the same. We fix the root problem by giving them a proper second chance to actually evaluate on what they actually done within the status quo itself, right? And we can lower the rate of reoffenders at the end of the day. I think this is something that they need to be engaging on, right? The fact that there's reoffenders in the status quo is because they were never given the chance to actually rehabilitate and actually prove themselves that they want to change, right? The people perception is already bad, and they're already stuck within the framings that, oh, if you're already out of jail, even if you're out of a jail, basically you're still a crime offender and they were never going to be given a place in society. That is exactly why they reoffend these crimes. These are the things that we're trying to prevent under our side of the house. But if you don't take that all of account panels, then we will propose to you a better a harm that is only existing under their side of the house. In terms of labeling and in terms of objectivity, how is it going to be better under our side, right? So what's the labeling here? Labeling of people who do crime will lead to more harms and discriminations towards minorities. Media get their main profit from the amount of engagement that they get, right? Hence, they would heavily integrate and heavily prioritize cases that would gain more engagement and discourses coming from audiences at the end of the day. Why are they profit oriented then? I think my PM has already explained within this, right? Inherently, because all medias are private owned, making it inherently focusing within the engagement, right? So what's the picturization of this then, and how are they actually going to portray it within media? When a crime is done of the same proximity, but it's done by this one person who is a part of minority and one person that is not a part of minority, they would most likely put spotlight and twist headlines on the minority one, since it is the one that is going to be gaining more engagement and gaining more discourses that will get them the profit at the end of the day within the viewers and etc. Right? We posit to you that the engagement is always going to be bad and will not be a sense of check and balance at the end of the day. Why? They need to take into account that audience exists within a spectrum. There are going to be people who are inherently progressive and woke, but not people are like this. If they want to claim this, then they're living in utopia. And right-wing, there's still people who are like right-wing populists that are inherently going to be more vocal within the crimes that are exposed within the media, right? That are going to be more vocal. The spread of identity will only become a justification for these radical racist people that put the blame on race and not within the actual crime that they actually commit. Inherently, making an audience that is inherently biased and focus on the prejudice that's already existing in the status quo, right? Opposition cannot enter this debate on the check and balance from the discourse that is manifested from this exposure at the end of the day, right? Why? Because there's going to be too many discourses that is not going to be centralized within the crime, but more about like who done it itself. Why is this bad then? What will this lead to? More narrative that is going to be manifested to society is labeling of certain groups, not about like the awareness about like what is inherently like the motives of this crime at the end of the day, and in terms of like what is actually like the sole existence, like
what is the incentive of the doers itself at the end of the day. They will use this as a justification to inherently just blame one minority group. The labeling is really going to be bad at the end of the day. This is a trade-off that they need to make. At the very least, under our side, there's not going to be minorities that are oppressed because of like one person doing, even for the people who are innocent at the end of the day. An example to this is in America. Let's actually take a look of the existence of the narrative of 1350, right? This is a narrative that dehumanized Black people as a minority group, labeling each Black people who are even innocent and entangling them with the crimes that are existing within, even if they are not the doers of the crime at the end of the day, right? We posit to you that this labeling is inherently going to be something that is harmful, far more harmful for literally everyone in this layer of society. People who are inherently already innocent at the very first place are going to be taken account as someone who's like someone who can do crime just because they have like the same race within like the people that are exposed within media. We say it's better for them to actually be anonymous and actually focus on like the proximity of crime that they actually done, right? But let's compare. If they want to champion on the proximity of objectivity, we believe that inherently this will exist better under our side. Why? Because it's not going to be contingent to the discourses that is happening outside of the media. Everything will be done based on the court and the court only, not only within the discourses that is happening outside of the court itself. We posit to you that the court is more going to be objective because they're not going to be inherently like focused on the way that how does people actually react to this and how does it going to be better in terms of how it's going to be better in terms of objectivity, right? In terms of victim closure then, we posit to you that victim closures and catharsis comes from victims actually seeing the offenders actually get the things that they do for their crime. Getting into jail, for example, we think that inherently is still going to be better. We still reach deterrence. Inherently, that is why we're proud to propose.
Thank you so much for that speech. Inviting second speaker of opposition, here.
Trigger warning, I would say something that would probably be triggering, and it's for the debate purposes. Their side's case are contingent on the fact that A, news are only controlled by billionaires, as if independent journalism doesn't exist, even if like their PM already mentioned on how like there are news on Twitter, which is like in a way one of like independent journalism. But B, that there are petty crimes, but that there are petty crimes like for people that like does criminal because they are forced to. But we'll go as far to say that A, petty criminals images won't be as that bad because firstly, people either won't care as much about like small crimes like stealing and etc. Or secondly, that people's perception won't be that bad if the criminals are like poor people who steal and etc. because they are hungry and etc. Because people, even if they try to frame to you that peoples are biased and people are like gonna blame the wrong things for etc. We would say that people are reasonable enough to know which crimes are so inherently evil and which crimes are like justifiable and deserve a second chances. People are rational enough to do that. But then B, we would say that even if petty news like will be that like a significant case under our side, we would say that A, petty news will fade away so much easier because of the lack of importance for the public's perception about like these petty crimes, but then because like it will fade away, right? But then regarding about like billionaires and etc., we would argue that media won't have any interest to like being bribed by billionaires and etc. because we'd argue that if they are really profit oriented, they will most likely want to like generate more revenue for like publicizing the criminals in the media, because we'd argue that the money and the revenue that they get from like publicizing all of this is so much more than what the billionaires and like this bribery gives them. And this will not only that give them more money, but also gives them more credibility and better image as a news form in itself. But then on how they say that medias are like profit oriented and they want to gain more revenue by like making viral headlines for etc. We'd argue that this characterization is bad on their side of the house, because we'll flip this by saying that when in your side medias cannot publicize this criminal, the news will just like the news and your side of the house will just be like a bunch of words with nothing eye catching or like being able to be paid attention to by the society. So what will most likely happen on their side of the house? Medias would like most likely try to make the news as engaging as possible, and will most likely try to insert will most likely resolve to like publicize the victims instead to make the news more attention catching. This harms the wrong person, and victim closure won't be achieved under their side of the house. But let's talk about but we'll go as far to say that we are willing to trade off the chances of like extreme image destruction for these small petty criminals that we prove to be unlikely, but will engage anyways. We'd argue that this chances of like image destruction for like small criminals are outweighed by the importance of exposing big criminals like corruptors, rapists, and etc. Because these big criminals as victims can be any of the society, and we'd argue that this publicization of the criminals are like a way for are important as a self-defense for the society in itself. But then let's talk about like the society's perception under our side of the house on how their PM said that awareness will still exist under our side of the house. We believe that awareness are symmetrical. Crime happens all the time, therefore people are aware that crime happen either way. The thing is, society's perception are also like need to be fulfilled not only by the awareness but also the feeling of them being safe. The thing is that when you anonymize the criminals, there are an implication that that by protecting the criminals, you side with the criminals, and B, it will seem that the court or like the government or like the news doesn't do anything to like publicize to the public on like who to be wary in a certain area, for example. So we'd argue that society's perception is better under our side of the house, because when you are aware of crimes and are able to trust the government to maximize the punishment and deterrence for the criminals, therefore society will feel safe, and not only that, they will trust the CGS system, better. This is exclusively better under our side of the house. Society will trust the CGS to perform as it is. But then how they said that court will do what they have to do, like, and not gonna be altered by the externalities, an example. But we'd argue that when they talk about like billionaires and the medias, we would say that billionaires are most likely to bribe in the court itself. We would argue that courts are problematic. Therefore, this publicization is a way of check and balances to these problematic courts by increasing public participation. And this is good because like in the very first place, I already explained to you on how people are rational enough to know which criminals are so inherently evil, so they are able to like give like a comparatively good opinions and like what to side about. But then B, on how this will make the courts and CGS system even better, because now with increased public participation and identification exists as a important self-defense, better deterrence by this image destruction is the only way to punish like these big criminals and etc. Because when we're talking about corruptors, yes, even if they argue like, they can just bribe their way out. Okay, but then if they are publicized, there are less trust from the society to actually like cater to what they want. So like when it comes to corruptors, it's better. But then when it comes to like rapists or murderers and etc., this again works as a self-defense or like as a way of society to know who to be wary of and etc. Any POI before I continue? Okay, no POI whatsoever. But then how would I say that their side of the house's case cannot work at the end of the day? Because firstly, when they say that billionaires will control the media and etc., so they will be untouched. But then again, we would argue that even if like let's just assume that all medias are like controlled by the billionaires, right? But then billionaires made a mistake and etc. We believe that independent journalism will still exist, like in Twitters, on how people can like find information from like their own society and etc. And this will also still be publicized. But then even if there are no independent journalism, there are no anonymity on these crimes. Therefore, all crimes will be publicized and people would know, who did this and who did that. And the process of court and the process of court will be so much clearer, because now people not only know what the victim do, but they also know what the kind of punishment that they deserve to get with all the circumstances that goes around with these criminals. Therefore, we'd argue that under our side of the house, the points of like CGS is fulfilled. First, rehabilitation, because now we'd argue that criminals will be able to will be pushed to rehabilitate and to fix their future actions, because there are digital because there are digital evidence in their crimes and etc. But then deterrence by image destruction is fulfilled. But then accountability will also be better under our side of the house, and retribution will also be better under our side of the house, because there are maximization of punishment and etc. And we offer better victim closure. I close my.
Thank you very much for that speech. Inviting third speaker of proposition, here.
Everything that I'm saying is just for the purpose of this debate. I don't mean to offend anyone. And for POIs, I will take it either before my clashes or in between my clashes. So please provide a POI. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Judges, remember that the crimes that will be published by the media exist in the spectrum here, right? Sometimes the media does highlight billionaires and politicians, but at the same time, sometimes they also target minorities because they know that they will also have a lot of engagement here, right? Our path to winning here is to prove why impacts towards the billionaires and politicians are insignificant compared to the vulnerable minority communities that are villainized and are the vulnerable actors here, right? So, moving on to my clashes here. We think that there's 2 clashes in this debate. The first one is about which side fulfills the principle of the criminal justice system the most. And then second clash, I will talk about the practicals on how it will actually benefit society here. So, first clash regarding principles. We have already told you 3 things here. The first one is on how awareness still exists in our side because we still publish the chronology and the time and place. And then secondly, we already told you on how the criminal justice system will be more objective because the media won't take part in the process of ruling. But then thirdly, we already told you on how retribution and punishment should be proportional here, and that is the burden that they have never engaged in to our side when the media actually targets minority communities here. We will explain to you why the impact towards billionaires and the politicians will be marginal, but they have never engaged to why it will be okay for the minorities to be targeted here, right? So even if they bring it up in their whip, it will be too late here, right? So we think that the purpose of this criminal justice system is for them to judge objectively and give proportional punishment. But how is it justified when 2 people commit exactly the same crime, but they are punished differently just because of their race or gender or any other identifier here, right? Their opposition whip needs to answer this here. But then let's actually engage to the case of politicians and billionaires here. Their case was, they have betrayed the people's trust, so now they must be punished by the people here. But then notice, even if we take that the crimes are notice how if the crimes of the politicians or and the billionaires or whoever it is is that heinous and that unjustified, we think that even without the media, people can do their own research and find out who is the one behind it here. We know that media like Twitter are also considered media here, but the fact that the crimes, the chronology, the time, place are published, and also because the information regarding politicians and billionaires are available in public, we think that the public are able to talk mouth to mouth about like which ones are like who are the ones that are likely to do who are like the most likely perpetrators of this crime of corruption to begin with here, right? And notice how this doesn't even knife into our own case, because the check and balance on our side without media still exists through the people talking to each other here, right? The impact here means that we can still match the impact in their side on how the politicians will not be elected, because like people will talk mouth to mouth, oh, I think this politician was the one who did it, oh, I think this billionaire was the one who committed all the crimes here, and that will actually lead to all of the impact that they've been trying to champion here on all the check and balance towards the billionaires and all the politicians here. So simply like if a billionaire like committed crimes, and then like people can speculate and also do their own research mouth to mouth, they are able to boycott their own. They are able to boycott it, right? So we think that the benefits in their side are not exclusive here. But then one question left unanswered here, right? Later, I'll answer you after my first clash here, is why is it even unjustified for like the cases in which the media actually targets these minority communities here. We have already told you since my DPM here on how it's very likely for the media to take a crime that was made by a certain race, or like made by a person who's like from a certain race or from a certain gender, just because they know that I will get engagement from like the right-wing media here, right? This is a question left unanswered. Meanwhile, we have already told you on why, at least in our side, people can still talk mouth to mouth and still give the politicians and the billionaires like the punishment that they need here. But sure, moving on, before I move on to my second clash, POI.
If you concede that courts are problematic, therefore they need check and balances, what are the benefit of check balances that is based under assumption that exists under your side of the house? If it exists under assumption, it's not check and balance.
Thank you for that, because that is exactly what I'm going to discuss in my second clash here. In my second clash, I will also talk about how check and balance, how media does not actually provide check and balance, but it instead harms it here, right? And how we will actually, and this will then links back to my previous teammates' case here, right? But then in my second clash here, I'll prove to you on how we have lesser magnitude and scale of labeling in our side, and we actually prevent future victims in the first place here. We think that future victims are the most important thing in this debate here, and I will later prove that. This will then eventually links back to our case since PM here, right? So what did they tell you here? Their case regarding politicians and billionaires here. One thing that they told you was that there will be better deterrence in their side. But we think that it won't work anyway, because if politicians and billionaires think that they won't be caught anyway, then I don't think that they will be scared of the punishment or like the social sanctions to begin with here. Why is this possible? 3 reasons. A, because they can silence witnesses through money. They can bribe them here, right? So from the very first place, if the witnesses are not going to report to the court, we don't think that it will even start to begin with. Therefore, it diminishes all the mechanisms that they have provided in their side. But then secondly, they can silence the media here. But okay, let's take their best case scenario in which they told you, oh, there will be independent journalism and like people can still talk on Twitter here, right? Even if there are independent journalism, they can also hire buzzers to control the narrative here. Just like how they will give like hundreds of millions of rupiah for the people who, so that celebrities can defend these so-and-so politicians and billionaires here, right? So even if there is still independent journalism, the fact that these billionaires and politicians do have a large amount of money and a lot of power means that they can still silence the media even if there is independent journalism here, right? So that means deterrence won't exist, or like deterrence is a deadlock, because corruptors will most likely just find a way that the law couldn't detect their crimes here. So, but okay, let's still engage. Even if politicians do care about punishment, they won't care about social sanctions, because the law's main principle is about incarceration, and insofar as politicians and billionaires can rebuild their reputation, it is a deadlock. But what's the deadlock breaker here then? We think that if we can prevent media to even know, then because they now know that they can no longer control the media narrative, so they are likely to be punished fairly insofar as the judge won't be pressured by the media, or like the judge won't be having like external pressure here, right? But then what's the weighing here? We think that we need to weigh the most for reoffenders here, right? We're not trying to invalidate victims, but we think regardless, the state also has a duty to prevent future victims here. That is why our case regarding preventing reoffenders are the most important thing in this debate, because that is how we can stop even more victims from suffering here. So the idea of preventing the existence of victims themselves is deterrence. We have already told you on how it's a deadlock here at the end of the day here, right? So the only delta regarding future victims, if it's not a deadlock here, is stopping reoffenders to begin with here, which is only exclusive in our side, because this links back to my Prime Minister's case on how instead of being instead of like them being super depressed and being being villainized by the media, they can actually live a relatively more comfortable life. They can, at the very least, they can reintegrate back into society, and they won't do the same crime again here. So in our worst case scenario, even if in our side current victims get marginally less closure, it's still okay because we win in terms of magnitude here. Why? Because current victims, they already suffered much of the harm. Even if you give closure to them, they have already experienced the harm. You cannot really prevent or reverse it, right? But then what about future victims here? They haven't suffered the harm. They haven't suffered the irreversible harm here, right? So someone who has suffered and then see their offenders being hated by the media won't feel much better here, right? It's marginal here. But people who were never harmed, they get most impact because they haven't suffered the irreversible harms here. And so far as the state has the responsibility to protect its people, we win because we provide analysis on why we prevent future victims. Proud to propose.
Thank you very much for that speech. Inviting third speaker of opposition, here.
Trigger warning, I may say some things that seem a little sensitive. I'm saying this purely for debate, no other intentions at all. A moment. This house would require media to anonymize the identity of criminals, which I highly disagree on. By showing the identities of the criminals themselves, there are a few benefits: more to society, more to possible future victims, and it's going to be better for the victims in our side. But first of all, regarding of they assume that court could function effectively without externalities, but I want to point out that this is contingent on the fact that if the court is good, at least in the outside, if court is corrupted, criminals will still be publicized. Criminals will still be publicized, and this maximizes the possibility of deterrence. They're saying that the court could function effectively without externalities, but this doesn't go to all courts. Some courts are still corrupted. Some courts are possibly slided into by people who would do something to justice and that. And if in our side, if those kind of courts exist, which they would exist in our side, criminals will still be publicized because the maximization of deterrence, whereas their identity is shown to public, people will know who they are, people will give them a social effect that they won't do it anymore, and I'll explain it further. And also, regarding of media wouldn't target minorities because we'd argue that society are already progressive enough to know that if minor petty cases are put out to public and something like that, people would already know that they do it because of a reason. They're not doing it because they have to. They're not like that. They're doing something because of a reason. They're not doing it because it's a big crime or something like that. Hence, people will actually look at it, and that kind of news would fade away, and it wouldn't affect those criminals as much as the proposition claim. And B, even though there are conservative people, they'll still target high doers more because when minorities do crime, it isn't as harmful. But high doers harm more. How? High doers like corruption and stuff like that. They harm a lot of people. They harm society. They harm their victims. They harm a lot of people. Not only a few people. Whereas in petty crimes, may it be like stealing from a certain person, they only harm one person. They only harm one victim. But high doers, their effect is more. They're more vast, and they affect so many more people. And even though there are labelings, but this labeling exists, we'd argue that it will be alright because the government would fix these issues more because these issues are publicized. Because these issues are publicized, it'll catch the government attention, and those kind of labelings will be fixed. We first argue that petty crimes are regarding of their issues that petty crimes are getting highlighted. publicly won't stop petty crime doers from going on rehabilitations and something like that, because petty crimes aren't going to get as much highlight, because if there are two kind of news, one, someone is stealing a phone from someone, and the other is a politician going to has corrupted the national funds. Who is going to get more highlight? Of course, the politician, because it has more harm, it affects more people, not just the one person who's stealing the phone. And they keep going on about that people who do crimes are still human, there's better for second chance, and because of these kind of publications, they won't get to do rehabilitation and stuff like that. We'd argue that no, people are rational enough to know which kinds of crime are good. No, thank you. Which crimes are deserving of second chance and which crimes are not deserving of second chance. We argue that this publication is better for the crimes that are not forgivable. And because the media cannot, in their side, because the media cannot identify criminals and their need of engagement isn't there, the media would shift over to other actors, which are victims. That is, if we played with the government's case of media wanting extravagant news highlight, because the media cannot go to the criminals, they'd go to something else. They'd go to another actor who's there, which are the victims. This is more harmful for the victim itself, because they won't get the closure that they need. They'll constantly be in stress that they're going to be on the news and something like that. Whereas in our side, we're focused. No, thank you. Whereas regarding of the criminal justice system in our side, we argue that it's better in our side because rehabilitation doesn't only go because of people getting second chance. They're going to get rehabilitation psychologically and something like that, getting second chance, yada yada. Rehabilitation can also be formed by the people seeing that they're doing something wrong. People would actively say that that what they're doing is wrong. No, thank you. People would actively say that what they're doing is wrong. People would push them to evaluate what they're doing, not just through rehabilitation where these big crime doers aren't going to take account of what anything they're doing because they've already done it before, but they're going to rehabilitate because people are constantly telling them it's wrong. People are attacking them. People are seeing who they are, and they can't hide from the accountability of their crime anymore. And regarding victim closure, we'd argue it's better in our side because these victims are getting justice of what they're going through. Because the doers in our side are big crimes, not just little crimes, the victim will surely be affected highly by the criminals doing. In our side, the victim will be better because people are going to see who are the main doers of this thing, and it eliminates the possibility for future victims. Why? Because people will already know who to be aware of since it's already on the media. People will know who to be aware of. People will know who to be scared of. People won't be scared of everyone willy-nilly. This society is still going to be okay, and the victim is going to be lessened because this person who's doing the crime no, thank you. People who keep doing these crimes are already put to the highlight. They think second chancely before they're doing something again. Hence, victim closure is better on our side. And deterrence is also better on our side because if the doers are doing big crimes, and sometimes the law isn't enough to abide them. The law says that they're going to be punished for this for certain years. They have to do through social helping or something like that. But there's also something, because the media already shows who the doers are. There's something from the public, which is the law of the public, where they actively shame the victim, where they actually shame the doers of this crime. Hence, the doers would actively be watched by people. They'd have to think second time before they have to do anything. They're going to be more careful, which minimizes the possibility of victim and the possibility of crime in the future long run. And regarding of petty crimes that are done by minor groups, as they say, we'd argue that it won't get as much highlight, and we're going to treat it offer better prioritization, which is what getting the big criminals to the justice that the victims need. Smaller criminals get highlighted, sure, but the main spotlight is on the bigger criminals who are publicly known, and their doing affects so many more people. We'd argue that it's a trade-off for a better reason, and the victims will still get the justice in the end, and less likely for minor groups to get less rehabilitation or something like that, because the highlight won't ultimately be on them. I think that's all from me. I'm proud to oppose.
Thank you very much for that speech. Call upon opposition reply to close out opposition bench. Hear, hear.
I'll divide my reply into two parts. First, the strategical mistakes coming from government side of the house, and secondly, how do each side compare to each other. The first thing then, the thing is, I do think that the strategical mistakes that comes from government side of the house in and on itself is simple. Their lack of characterization of who is affected, how people react to media, and etc., right? Therefore, this lack of characterization actively kills their arguments about racism, and secondly, about deterrence and victims closure, and second chances. Basically all of their argument, right? What do we mean by this? The thing is, the people who are affected by media are not petty crimes who do stuff because they are forced to do so, but rather an inherent evil, cases of corruption that happens insofar as it harms many people in terms of scale, right? But the thing is, the best responses that Op could give to you in this debate about this is the fact that, oh, media is corrupt, media is bribed by billionaires, for example, by politicians, for example, right? I do think that one, in so on that your PM characterizes media as a profit-driven company, we would argue that profit probability is higher when you are a media that is credible, right? Insofar as being credible is vital for your profit, being known of accepting bribery will reduce the amount of profit that you get, for example, right? But moreover, the thing is, the way that this functions is that if you, insofar as the media are corrupt, it is better under our side of the house, insofar as independent researcher could accrue the information by themselves or credibly of who are doing who and why are they incentivized to do so. Therefore, these people doesn't exist under their side of the house insofar as these people are punished by the ethical guidelines that exist. So what do this tackle? This proves to you that petty crimes doesn't get erased off of their ability to do to have second chances, for example, right? This proves to you that racism wouldn't exist, for example, right? Insofar as we prove to you that this is not a case about racism, but about a case of power abuse by politicians or about a case of power abuse by billionaires. But even if racism happens, we'll bite the bullet and say that it is good. What is the analogy here? If racism is towards people coming from region B of Indonesia, we'll also say to you that the stereotypes is okay, insofar as there is a stereotype that people from region B are like, I don't know, like stealing from others, for example, or like, robbery, etc. We would argue that there will be better check and balances for the government of region B to do better of the case of poverty, limiting poverty, giving more subsidy, etc., which caters to the marginalized group that they say would get racism under our side of the house. Therefore, victim closure is much better under our side of the house. Why is this? Okay, coming on to the two main clash, victim closure and deterrence. Deterrence is quickly win under our side of the house insofar as there is no clear mitigation to it. But about victim closure, insofar as the best thing that we could do to these people who are the victim is giving them the self-defense mechanism to prevent further crime from happening. What happens under their side of the house is that they don't have the identification tool that is necessary to pick which politicians to choose in the next election, to not have the same case of corruption happening again, for example, right? To pick which billionaires to support, for example, or which billionaires to scrutinize, for example, right? This mechanism of self-defense doesn't exist under their side of the house. Victim closure is worse. But moreover, I would argue to you that all of their prerequisite is already tackled by under our side of the house. The big clash is about victim closure and deterrence. We win on deterrence, we win on victim closure. Proud to oppose.
Thank you very much for that speech. Calling upon proposition reply to close out the Octo finals of LDI cabang Bahasa Inggris.
Give me a second. We're starting my reply in 3, 2, 1. Judges, it is unstrategic for opposition to come in by trying to champion incorruptors, billionaires, which are people who have bigger power to begin with, that could not even be compared to those who are involved in banality they didn't even want to commit in the very first place, or falsely accuse people who are allegedly already be published in the very beginning, and or the fact that they brought a lot of like higher degree criminals who are already inherently insane in the very beginning, which inherently will be fixed within the proportionality itself, and the fact that those higher degree criminals who are probably already insane and crazy probably won't really care about social sanctions. But this is the thing. The inherent problem of the CGS and the media coverage nowadays is the very fact that their incentive is to fulfill the majority's interest, which is harmful to vulnerable actors. Why? Because they will put labels in the inherent of identity itself to begin with. For a fact, like mentioning the criminal's religion or race to actually make it more viral, especially to cater to like right-wingers example, right? We already posit to you that media will highlight petty crimes anyway because inherently they get engagement from right-wing viewers, and I'll probably talk about it in like our competitive. But let's actually emphasize the most prominent sides of each bench and compare them, right? First, about the aspect in actor. Opposition posit to you that there will be more public scrutiny on criminals and or like deterrence, right? They talk about billionaires and like rapists or like evil people. But we say that first, in the case of billionaire, scrutiny would not be effective because even if they are insulted by the entire earth, they are still capable to reintegrate to society no matter what by their entire influence because their bank account is still very huge, right? Billionaires are still out there, even in the status quo. A lot of like, billionaires that are like literally, abusing human rights are still there because they literally influence people. They have their own money. But the initial incentive there's literally an initial incentive for police to even catch billionaires is literally very low. The scale is very tiny because a lot of cases that are only like, for example, the very explanation is that many cases of these billionaires come out years later after their initial crime, for example, right? In the end of the day, deterrence will not happen because these billionaires can just try to find a way to not get caught in the end of the day. But second of all, about inherently evil people, I think in the end of the day, these insane people will not care about social sanctions or public humiliation because they are already satisfied by their own case itself, by their own crime itself. It's not something that's going to be debated in the very first place. The more likelihood is crimes that are involve people on the ground because media need to thrive every day. This is why a lot of like US news are like more focused on urban crimes in which like a lot of neighborhood of black people, for example, because that's like easier to publish. It's an everyday single life that they can actually put like new blogs every day and keep their entire money like circulating, right? But second of all, in terms of world, right, like opposition best case is like more bad people are going to be booed online, even if they won't automatically like be imprisoned. They say that at least social sanctions are there, and they also talk about like petty crimes are actually going to be seen like positively. But our best case is that people who are falsely accused under banality will not be humiliated by digital footprints, reintegration into society, bigger scale of people living better life, post-retribution, and how we actually humanize people because we think that everyone deserves a second chance, right? But this is the weighing. Regardless, inherently bad people will not care about sanctions. They won't be easily deterred by hates, but petty crimes would probably symmetrically be seen in a utility metric because we already told you like open cases exist, third party exists. At least on our side, there is a safety place for minorities, for people who are vulnerable, who have been falsely accused, and like for example, the life is not stake, like people in the cartel, for example, are still like are not going to be haunted by the footprints that are literally on the internet, right? Their worst case is that people would have high prejudice on specific groups that are labeled in the media and long-term humiliation. It's less likely for these people to want to integrate back because in the end of the day, they're pessimistic that they're even going to be accepted in the very first place. No matter what, your name is already contaminated, right? In the end of the day, it's hard to mitigate their inherent worst case. It's hard to mitigate prejudice of people that alienate one another, but politicians and billionaires would organically be found either way because the entire needs of people are still going to exist. Therefore, very, very proud to propose.
Thank you very much for the exciting debate. For all debaters, please go back to the debaters hall. The announcement of this round will be conducted there. Thank you and good luck.
Welcome to Yogyakarta, the city of students. The city where a significant number of public and private schools and universities are located. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta, a private university established on September 27, 1965 by Yayasan Slamet Riyadi Yogyakarta.
Dalam bahasa Sanskerta, Atma berarti jiwa dan Jaya berarti unggul. Sehingga Atma Jaya berarti jiwa yang unggul. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta juga memiliki semboyan dalam bahasa Latin Serviens in Lumine Veritatis yang artinya melayani dalam cahaya kebenaran.
The four core values upheld by UAJY are excellence, inclusivity, humanism, and integrity. Excellence implies a quality or being better than others. Inclusivity means encompassing all social groups. Humanism, the definition, means to serve the common interest of fellow humans. Integrity means adherence to the moral and ethical principles, honesty, reliability, consistency in words and acts, and a sense of responsibility. UAJY supports diverse values, cultures, religions, races, ethnicities, and languages as a university with students from all across Indonesia. UAJY's diversity is an asset for further collaboration and synergy in preparing for a better future.
Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta memiliki 4 kampus yang terbagi menjadi Kampus 1, Gedung Santo Alfonsus. Kampus 2, Gedung Santo Thomas Aquinas. Kampus 3, Gedung Santo Bonaventura. Dan Kampus 4, Gedung Bunda Teresa. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta memiliki fakultas dengan berbagai program studi sarjana, program studi magister, dan international undergraduate program.
Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta is a second home for every individual to develop and share information, and a university with a high-quality education to attain unlimited aspirations and accomplishments. To achieve the goals, UAJY provides classrooms with a hybrid learning system, laboratories in each faculty as a room to explore, co-working space as a discussion room, medical personnel who are always available in the university clinic room, and a library that provide books, e-books, and digital libraries to open a wide window onto the world in various ways.
UAJ selalu konsisten memberikan pelayanan yang didasari rasa solidaritas kepada sesama. Selama saya bekerja di UAJY, saya merasakan kekeluargaan yang sangat kuat menjadi dasar bagi seluruh sivitas akademika.
UAJY endeavors to develop graduates who are ethical, creative, innovative, adaptive, transformational, collaborative, and benevolent. All these are aimed to help students achieve their future dreams.
Mendidik itu mengajarkan ilmu pengetahuan dan berbela rasa serta berkontribusi pada kesejahteraan masyarakat. Hal tersebut menjadi landasan fundamental bagi Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta untuk mencetak generasi muda yang unggul di bidangnya dan memiliki integritas moral yang tinggi. Saya bangga menjadi bagian dari Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta. Viva UAJY, kami bangga ada di sini.
Semestinya engkau bisa mencobanya lebih bijak, semampunya berusaha, berjuang jujur, berkarya, tanpa pernah meragukan kemampuan pada kita. Sungguh percayakan saja, kita istimewa, bisa. Sungguh sebuah karunia, kita saling jaga rasa, generasi anak bangsa, karena jujur itu juara.
Selamat datang di Gedung Selamat Riyadi, Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta dengan bangga menjadi tuan rumah Lomba Debat Indonesia tahun 2025. Ajang yang mempertemukan para pemikir muda terbaik dari SMA seluruh Indonesia. Di sini, gagasan diuji, keberanian diuji, dan logika dipertajam. Kompetisi ini bukan hanya tentang menang, tetapi tentang bagaimana setiap peserta menyuarakan masa depan. Dari Sabang hingga Merauke, para delegasi hadir membawa semangat, budaya, dan harapan. Bersatu dalam satu panggung argumentasi terbesar untuk SMA di Indonesia. Selamat datang di Lomba Debat Indonesia 2025. Siapkan argumen terbaikmu, tunjukkan potensimu, dan jadilah generasi pemikir masa depan.
Ini Cika, dia telah lulus SMA, tapi bingung mau kuliah di mana.
Jangan bingung, mari bergabung bersama kami di Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta.
UAJY memiliki 7 fakultas dan 14 program studi yang dapat jadi pilihan loh.
Jangan khawatir, UAJY menyediakan miliaran beasiswa yang bisa kamu dapatkan. Tentunya, terdapat program seleksi yang masih dibuka. Informasi lebih lanjut dapat mengunjungi situs pmb.uajy.ac.id. So, tunggu apa lagi?
Bakal nyesel loh kalau nggak daftar sekarang.
Welcome to Yogyakarta, the city of students. The city where a significant number of public and private schools and universities are located. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta, a private university established on September 27, 1965 by Yayasan Selamat Riyadi Yogyakarta.
Dalam bahasa Sanskerta, Atma berarti jiwa dan Jaya berarti unggul. Sehingga Atmajaya berarti jiwa yang unggul. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta juga memiliki semboyan dalam bahasa Latin Serviens in Lumine Veritatis yang artinya melayani dalam cahaya kebenaran.
The four core values upheld by UAJY are excellence, inclusivity, humanism, and integrity. Excellence implies equality or being better than others. Inclusivity means encompassing all social groups. Humanism, the definition, means to serve the common interest of fellow humans. Integrity means adherence to the moral and ethical principles, honesty, reliability, consistency in words and acts, and a sense of responsibility. UAJY supports diverse values, cultures, religions, races, ethnicities, and languages as a university with students from all across Indonesia. UAJY's diversity is an asset for further collaboration and synergy in preparing for a better future.
Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta memiliki 4 kampus yang terbagi menjadi Kampus 1, Gedung Santo Alfonsus. Kampus 2, Gedung Santo Thomas Aquinas. Kampus 3, Gedung Santo Bonaventura. Dan Kampus 4, Gedung Bunda Teresa. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta memiliki fakultas dengan berbagai program studi sarjana, program studi magister, dan international undergraduate program.
Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta is a second home for every individual to develop and share information, and a university with a high-quality education to attain unlimited aspirations and accomplishments. To achieve the goals, UAJY provides classrooms with hybrid learning system, laboratories in each faculty as a room to explore, co-working space as a discussion room, medical personnel who are always available in the university clinic room, and a library that provide books, e-books, and digital libraries to open a wide window onto the world in various ways.
UAJ selalu konsisten memberikan pelayanan yang didasari rasa solidaritas kepada sesama. Selama saya bekerja di UAJY, saya merasakan kekeluargaan yang sangat kuat menjadi dasar bagi seluruh sivitas akademika.
UAJY endeavors to develop graduates who are ethical, creative, innovative, adaptive, transformational, collaborative, and benevolent. All these are aimed to help students achieve their future dreams.
Mendidik itu mengajarkan ilmu pengetahuan dan berbela rasa serta berkontribusi pada kesejahteraan masyarakat. Hal tersebut menjadi landasan fundamental bagi Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta untuk mencetak generasi muda yang unggul di bidangnya dan memiliki integritas moral yang tinggi. Saya bangga menjadi bagian dari Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta. Viva UAJY, kami bangga ada di sini.
Semestinya engkau bisa mencobanya lebih bijak, semampunya berusaha, berjuang jujur, berkarya, tanpa pernah meragukan kemampuan pada kita. Sungguh percayakan saja, kita istimewa bisa. Sungguh sebuah karunia, kita saling jaga rasa, generasi anak bangsa, karena jujur itu juara. Sungguh sebuah karunia, kita saling jaga rasa, generasi anak bangsa, karena jujur itu juara.
Selamat datang di Gedung Selamat Riyadi, Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta dengan bangga menjadi tuan rumah Lomba Debat Indonesia tahun 2025. Ajang yang mempertemukan para pemikir muda terbaik dari SMA seluruh Indonesia. Di sini, gagasan diuji, keberanian diuji, dan logika dipertajam. Kompetisi ini bukan hanya tentang menang, tetapi tentang bagaimana setiap peserta menyuarakan masa depan. Dari Sabang hingga Merauke, para delegasi hadir membawa semangat, budaya, dan harapan. Bersatu dalam satu panggung argumentasi terbesar untuk SMA di Indonesia. Selamat datang di Lomba Debat Indonesia 2025. Siapkan argumen terbaikmu, tunjukkan potensimu, dan jadilah generasi pemikir masa depan.
Cika, dia telah lulus SMA, tapi bingung mau kuliah di mana?
Jangan bingung, mari bergabung bersama kami di Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta.
UAJY memiliki 7 fakultas dan 14 program studi yang dapat jadi pilihan loh.
Jangan khawatir, UAJY menyediakan miliaran beasiswa yang bisa kamu dapatkan. Tentunya, terdapat program seleksi yang masih dibuka. Informasi lebih lanjut dapat mengunjungi situs pmb.uajy.ac.id. So, tunggu apa lagi?
Bakal nyesel loh kalau nggak daftar sekarang.
Welcome to Yogyakarta, the city of students. The city where a significant number of public and private schools and universities are located. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta, a private university established on September 27, 1965 by Yayasan Selamat Riyadi Yogyakarta.
Dalam bahasa Sanskerta, Atma berarti jiwa dan jaya berarti unggul, sehingga Atmajaya berarti jiwa yang unggul. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta juga memiliki semboyan dalam bahasa Latin Serviens in Lumine Veritatis, yang artinya melayani dalam cahaya kebenaran.
The four core values upheld by UAJY are excellence, inclusivity, humanism, and integrity. Excellence implies a quality or being better than others. Inclusivity means encompassing all social groups. Humanism, the definition, means to serve the common interest of fellow humans. Integrity means adherence to the moral and ethical principles, honesty, reliability, consistency in words and acts, and a sense of responsibility. UAJY supports diverse values, cultures, religions, races, ethnicities, and languages as a university with students from all across Indonesia. UAJY's diversity is an asset for further collaboration and synergy in preparing for a better future.
Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta memiliki 4 kampus yang terbagi menjadi Kampus 1, Gedung Santo Alfonsus. Kampus 2, Gedung Santo Thomas Aquinas. Kampus 3, Gedung Santo Bonaventura. Dan Kampus 4, Gedung Bunda Teresa. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta memiliki fakultas dengan berbagai program studi sarjana, program studi magister, dan International Undergraduate Program.
Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta is the second home for every individual to develop and share information, and a university with a high-quality education to attain unlimited aspirations and accomplishments. To achieve the goals, UAJY provides classrooms with hybrid learning system, laboratories in each faculty as a room to explore, co-working space as a discussion room, medical personnel who are always available in the university clinic room, and a library that provide books, e-books, and digital libraries to open a wide window onto the world in various ways.
UAJY selalu konsisten memberikan pelayanan yang didasari rasa solidaritas kepada sesama. Selama saya bekerja di UAJY, saya merasakan kekeluargaan yang sangat kuat menjadi dasar bagi seluruh sivitas akademika.
UAJY endeavors to develop graduates who are ethical, creative, innovative, adaptive, transformational, collaborative, and benevolent. All these are aimed to help students achieve their future dreams.
Mendidik itu mengajarkan ilmu pengetahuan dan berbela rasa serta berkontribusi pada kesejahteraan masyarakat. Hal tersebut menjadi landasan fundamental bagi Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta untuk mencetak generasi muda yang unggul di bidangnya dan memiliki integritas moral yang tinggi. Saya bangga menjadi bagian dari Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta. Viva UAJY, kami bangga ada di sini.
Semestinya